Like none of them will be injured because last time nobody was injured. So when I connected with the phenomenon which had already occurred, I would say like there is no injury, there is no. I mean, uh, it was only the vehicles that got damaged because last time the same thing had happened. So there is a resemblance between these two phenomena or observations from the past studies. Yesterday I gave you one example, like I mean, when we spoke about the demand for the shampoos, just because there is availability, people are buying. Just because they are young, people are buying. Just because they are women, people are buying. Therefore, based on these experiences, I feel women will be, I mean, more inclined to buy, I mean, say some new variants of shampoos. And if it's a women dominated crowd, demand for uh, some new variant of shampoos will be there. If it is a young crowd, demand for new variant of shampoos will be there, and so on, right? Based on previous studies and whatever is my experience. And then scientific theories, scientific, not just scientific, it could even be, any kind of like concept. Higher the demand, higher the price, lesser will be the demand for normal goods. I can even say this. And say, for example, depends on what it is, whether it is some resemblance, whether it is past study, wherever you find a hypothesis, because you start believing what you have been observing as true. You either prove it or disprove it in this particular study. Like, for example, during COVID, we believe that people spent more on health. So, any such thing in some country, we will feel that people will spend more on health, right? So that is the kind of belief that you have been, or that is a kind of experience that you have been exposed to. And so you believe that to be true, formulate it as hypothesis when you start with your next research. Scientific theory, again, I say like when you are exposed to the rain directly, continuously, you are prone to catch common cold. So there is again that scientific theory because all these sinus, I'm not very familiar with the same medical terminologies or science. So the moment you are exposed to, uh, I mean, your body, your sinus nerves are all filled with water, you may get into some sinus issues. Then we talk about general patterns that influence. This is how, this is my thinking process. Like I see you violate the signal and go, there will be a car coming from some other direction which might collide. So these are certain processes that we think. And say, for example, if a child is exposed to sounds, exposed to talks, he or she learns to talk fast. This is a general pattern that we are observing. And we say when you start exposing him or her to people talking, he picks up to talk earlier. So these are some of the general patterns. These are the sources of hypothesis. Either you must have seen a phenomenon that has happened earlier, or past studies you have observed this has been happening and this will happen, and scientific theories, and again general patterns that are influencing the thinking process. Any doubts so far? Are you following? Your ma'am is calling. Just so what are the types of hypotheses that we have? The other days you all had written null hypothesis, alternate hypothesis. Apart from that, we also have something called as simple hypothesis. We'll go through each of them. Simple hypothesis basically you have one dependent variable and one independent variable. Like for example, if you eat chocolates, you will gain weight more, right? Weight soon. So there is weight and there is chocolate intake. So again, this is going to be a simple hypothesis where there is, you know, the meaning of variable, dependent, independent variable, class. Do you know the meaning of dependent, independent variable? Just see if there is anything I can share. Class, are you there? Supposing I say number of hours of study and marks scored. So number of hours of study influences your marks scored in the sense marks scored equal to number of hours of study, which means marks scored is a dependent variable and these two parameters keep varying, so they are called variable. So when I say the number of hours of study increases and uh, then you also score higher marks. So therefore, when the variables are classified as dependent and independent, like one will influence the other, right? When one influences the other, just one the thing, can you post in the group to join fast? So when I say one influences the others, like for example, Deepak, can you please message in the group?
Sure, ma'am. Harpit ma'am already messaged to join. I will also repeat the same.
Thank you. So when I say one variable influences the other, or one variable will cause an effect on the other variable. Like for example, high higher the prices, lower will be the demand. Then obviously, the prices are influencing the demand for that commodity. So therefore, demand is the dependent variable and price is the independent variable. So if you have one independent variable and one dependent variable, and the relationship between them is explained, then we say it is a simple hypothesis. Like, for example, weight has a significant impact on the intake of chocolates. Then, sorry, chocolate intakes has a significant impact on the weight. Therefore, we say this is a simple hypothesis. Complex hypothesis is we have more than one independent variables. Like for example, demand for a commodity may be influenced by, like we say, we yesterday had we were talking about say what were the the thing we were talking about? Gender, age, and then uh, availability. So these three were the variables that was influencing the demand for Pantene shampoos. Do you remember, recall the example we spoke about yesterday, class?
Yes, ma'am. So you are discussing on Pantene shampoo among
Yes.
the young peoples and the genders as well.
So gender, age group, and availability, right? These three are three independent variables and they are going to influence. See, any equation can have only one dependent variable. Independent variable can be one or more than one. Okay? So we are going to say independent variable has can be more than one, and if we are going to talk about that, then it is going to be a complex hypothesis. Like for example, I say demographic factors. What are demographic factors? Your age, gender, etc. Demographic factors influence the demand for Pantene shampoo. Then obviously it is going to be a complex hypothesis. Like for example, I have stated here, eating more vegetables and fruits leads to weight loss, gain, glow in skin. All these are variables. Reduce in risk of many diseases. So these three are all. Say for example, these three are going to be three independent variables here. There we spoke about three different independent variables. Following? Now, directional hypothesis, there is a particular direction. Like for example, a high amount of rainfall leads to increased crop growth. Therefore, we say high amount of rainfall, ज़्यादा rainfall रहेगा, ज़्यादा crop growth रहेगा. So there is a this thing, right? Say for example, there is a direction. This is also high, this is also high. If this is going to increase, that will also be increasing. If this is going to fall, that will also reduce. So we are talking about a direction in which it is moving. There are three types so far we discussed. We have many more types. Simple hypothesis, where we said that one independent variable and one dependent variable. That one independent variable will have a significant impact on the one dependent variable. Like for example, we said that what demand for demand will be higher, demand and price, right? If price is higher, demand will be lower, right? This was one dependent variable, one independent variable. Then another example we spoke about is a complex hypothesis, where we had one independent variable and one dependent variable and many independent variable. Like for example, uh, we said that demographic factors influence the demand for Pantene shampoo. Demographic factors are, what are the demographic factors we spoke about yesterday? We said about age and gender. So, when we said about age and gender, they influence the demand for Pantene shampoo. I'm going to test that hypothesis. And directional hypothesis, older the consumer, higher will be the demand for, lower will be the demand for Pantene shampoo, as per yesterday's example. Older the consumer, lower will be the demand for Pantene shampoo, which means age has an influence on the demand for Pantene shampoo. Are you following?
Yep, ma'am.
Then we talk about non-directional hypothesis, wherein, like how we mentioned, the two variables are not showing any direction. We say there will be a significant impact. Gender. See, gender again, gender has a significant influence on the demand for Pantene shampoo, right? So, gender again, uh, female customers, they are going to, here we are not saying higher, lower, etc. We are only talking about gender as a whole. So, because female customers are preferring the Pantene shampoo, and hence we say that gender has an influence on the demand of Pantene shampoos, demand for Pantene shampoos. समझ में आ रहा है आपको?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, the other day we discussed about null and alternate hypothesis, if you remember. There was some post in the group also, somebody had posted in the group also. So, null hypothesis talks about uh, a statement that is negative. We always talk about there is no significant association between gender and the demand for Pantene shampoo. There is a technical way to write hypothesis also. Though it is a statement that you believe, a proper English alone is not okay. You need to technically state it. If you, once we finish the types of hypothesis, I'll show you a small research paper, right? And we will discuss whatever we have covered till now, what it looks like. So we say that, just give me a second. I'll just say, just a minute. I'm just searching for it. Yeah, so that easier for us to understand, see and understand. Sorry, I'll just find out later. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So non-directional hypothesis, basically there is no theory or anything. It's just a relationship and it doesn't say any direction. Gender has no association with the demand for Pantene shampoos. And as we said, uh, null hypothesis is a negative statement. There is no significant difference. There is no significant association, etc. Now, associative or causal hypothesis, one causes a change, another causes an effect. Basically, you can have any number of variables, independent variables, but one dependent variable always, and any number of independent variables, and it is going to have an impact. One is going to have an impact on the other one. So we are going to talk about it as a causal hypothesis, basically. So cause and effect relationship is explained as I said. Rainfall impacts the crop growth. Rainfall does not have an impact on the crop growth. Any doubts so far?
No, ma'am.
These are some of the examples. I will go through them also. I'm just trying to upload this paper and then show you as an example. Maybe that will give you a practical insight. Or, the same kind of.
Ma'am, what is the last one? Last hypothesis is which one? For the example, if a person gets 7 hours of sleep.
Just give me a sec. Yeah. See, if a person gets 7 hours of sleep, he feels less fatigue. You can call it as causal associative. See, sleep has caused the fatigue, right? Less sleep has caused more fatigue. Correct? You can see, it is not necessary one statement will fall only under one category. You can call it as causal, directional, as well as associative hypothesis. Yeah,
Got it, ma'am.
there is no significant. This is going to be your null hypothesis, right? Consumption of sugary drinks every day leads to obesity. Now, again, this is a simple hypothesis as well as
Directional
and
hypothesis.
causal also. Okay. Any doubts so far? Any doubts?
No, ma'am.
Trying to open that and then share it with you. Did I share the recording yesterday? Yeah, I have
No,
opened.
no.
Okay, I will share the recording today. Now, what are the functions of hypothesis? See, whenever I have an objective, that is what is getting converted into a hypothesis, correct? My objective was to see what are the factors that influence this demand for Pantene shampoo, correct? So, and then we said based on whatever like past experience, yeah, based on whatever, we said that it is going to be gender, it is going to be age, it is going to be um, what was the other thing? Availability in the local stores. That has caused the demand for your Pantene shampoo. So, in the same way, I have an objective which is converted into a statement, tentative statement, which I believe is going to be true, right? So it is giving me it helps me in making observation. Now, had it been demand for Pantene shampoo, I will get into a lot of variables. Now, my focus is restricted only to these three variables. So, I will start observing the experiment in a better way. Plus, again, I have a starting point. I start. See, now these three have been in the past. So let me again check the same three variables and then I start observing these three variables alone. And apart from that, it helps me in verifying the observation. Like, see, मैं compare भी कर सकती हूँ. This is what I wanted to. So let me check these three variables alone. Or in the past, have they studied about it? So let me have a comparison. Class, are you following? Are you following? And again, any kind of inquiries, and my focus is in the right direction. I'm not left in the, supposing I tell you research on, say, demand for Pantene shampoos. So, what is your research on? Demand for Pantene shampoo. So, you will not have any focus. So, you need to narrow it down, make it more objective, and make it more focused. So, that objective, you are making a statement of, with that objective, you are making a focus statement or hypothesis. So, that is where you are able to bring in a link to the study, bring in a focus or narrow it down. That is what we say. Any doubt so far? Any doubt?
No, ma'am, it's good.
So, what did we say? I mean, just before we start with this, what did we see so far? We said that what is a hypothesis? What are the functions of a hypothesis? What are the types of a hypothesis? And what are the characteristics of a good hypothesis? Right? If it's a good hypothesis, obviously it is going to be helping you in taking your research in the right direction, right? And also you have narrowed down your study and you have made it more objective, which is evident with the help of your hypothesis. Now, how will hypothesis help in scientific method? Like, for example, any researcher, he is going to actually put down his thought directing how the experiment would take, right? Like, for example, if you remember, you must have written your science experiments uh, in school, your aim, and then your methods, and then your method, and then your result, and then finally a conclusion, kind of, correct? Observation, then conclusion, whatever. Do you remember that? So basically, what was, you had an aim there. So when you had that aim, how did you go about with your experiment? It was basically because of your aim here, and you form a question, right? Say for it, I mean, I'm not very familiar with, like, for example, salt is soluble in water, right? So now, what is my question? Is salt soluble, right? So we have all those concepts of solvent, solution, whatever. So we are going to salt, when it gets dissolved in water, gives you a salty solution. So what is the question? Dissolving of salt, will it help you in getting a solution? Will it help you in getting, say, a solution, right? Salty solution. So you are going to try. You have a background for that research, and then you have created a hypothesis. Correct? Class, are you understanding?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you have a result. So whenever I talk about scientific here, though I gave you an example of science, it is a systematic way we say. Scientific doesn't always mean only science subject experiments. It talks about a systematic way. So what is a systematic way? You have a research question. You will do a background research, which is your review of literature. Then, based on whatever is the observation there, you create a hypothesis. Then you say, I'm going to do the study in this. We say research design, we were talking about, right? And then we collect some data, we analyze the results of those data, we summarize the study, and then communicate the results. Are you able to associate? You are going to say that uh, what are the factors that have influenced the demand for Pantene shampoo? And you start doing a background research. Then you find consumers are all women, and then you feel it is a young women who consume this shampoo, and still, because the locality has more of young women population, it is that which has caused the demand for the Pantene shampoo. And then you create a hypothesis. You say gender and age have influenced the demand for Pantene shampoo. And then you design an experiment. You say, I'm going to do an in-depth study wherein I will collect some, or I will go interview, or I will observe what is happening with regard to Pantene shampoo in these localities, etc. And you collect the data, and then you are going to analyze what your results are. And I mean, you will either prove whatever you have said, either gender has an influence or not. That is going to be proven by you. Does age have an influence or not is going to be proven. But what you believe you have stated as hypothesis here. And you will summarize that experiment and communicate the results. Are you following, class?
Yes, ma'am.
Can we just have a look at this before we proceed? Not this one. Open that. Give me a sec, sir. Are you able to see this tab actually?
Your screen is not visible, ma'am.
Not visible. Give me a minute. Then I think it's not. It's not getting. Even now? Okay.
Not yet, ma'am.
Let's try to open this. Do you see this?
Yes, ma'am. Now we can see.
Trying to open this. Just to show you how what the flow of this thing is. Yeah. See, basically, abstract more is a gist of the study that you're going to make, which might include your findings also at times. This is a small research paper which talks about empirical in the sense with data collection, analysis, etc. Right? Empirical analysis of determinants of health expenditure. So, health expenditure here in rural Amravati, right? So, that's the dependent variable, and the rest are independent. So, we'll see what this thing is. Then we introduce the topic, and when I introduce the topic, there is where I state the problem statement. I said this was a problem statement, so I identified how was it during this time, right? And then I have introduced the topic here. When we introduce the topic, we are going to elaborate on the problem statement. And we have reviewed the literatures, past studies which have been conducted. You recall what we spoke about? Say this person has studied on Indian households, and like these people have also studied upon this. Class, are you following?
Yes, ma'am. We remember that.
Yeah. Then we spoke about research methodology, wherein you talk about your source of data, what what kind of analysis you are going to make, and what is the period of study, and what is the locality of study, etc. Right? And what are the variables that you are going to see, factors that are influencing health expenditures, like you are going to talk about socio-economic, their society, their income, etc. Right? And then family size, these are demographic factors, family size, education, occupation, all these things. See, dependent and independent variable, consumption expenditure on health. Everywhere you have only one equation can have only one dependent variable. It can have one or more than one independent variables. Age group, gender group, occupation, education group, family group, etc. are my independent variables. And now when we, then the next flow is, we have not spoken. See the hypothesis here. H naught stands for your null hypothesis. H1 is your alternate hypothesis. Exactly the opposite is your alternate hypothesis. We spoke about null hypothesis. Null hypothesis के ठीक opposite जो हो रहता है ना, उसको alternate hypothesis बोलते हैं. I said null hypothesis will be a negative statement. There is no significant association. मतलब connectivity नहीं है consumption expenditure on health और ये जो socio economic demographic factors है उनके बीच, correct? Whereas there is connectivity between uh, socio-economic, I mean, consumption expenditure on health and socio-economic and demographic factors, right, of the household survey. So I have taken the period. I have studied, Amravati district, rural part of Amravati district, and then this is how we present it. कोई भी रिसर्च आप करते हो उसको रिपोर्ट करना है. उसको रिपोर्ट जो है ना कैसे भी नहीं कर सकते हो. So that we will talk about it in the last chapter when we discuss. Are you following class?
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Till this we saw now, and we are still on hypothesis. Can I change my tab again?
Sure, ma'am. Sure.
Uh, so there is a technical way of writing. So we will learn about that when we learn about research reporting. Okay. So now let's see. See that hypothesis gives me a focus when I report the research or when I conduct the research. Like I form a question, which was a study about that Pantene shampoo, demand for Pantene shampoo. What influences the demand for Pantene shampoo? Okay. Then when I are you not able to, yeah, my seniors will, yeah, yes, I said, okay. Then I am doing a background research, which is my review of literature. Then I create a hypothesis, whatever through a phenomenon which is resembling earlier one, or I'm going to say in the past this has been the observation. Let me test it now also. So I create that as a hypothesis, or based on my observation, again I'm going to create a hypothesis. Any of these could be a source, and I'm going to design an experiment. ये सारे चीज है. Let me test and see. How will I test? I'm going to collect data from, say, rural Amravati, and I'm going to collect data pertaining to their demand for shampoos. I'm going to collect data on their on factors like their gender, their income, their expenditure, and and all other factors which I feel are relevant. And then I will collect the, how will I collect the data? Will I draft a questionnaire? Will I go and interview them personally? Will I take a schedule with me? Will I observe, etc.? Right? And when I collect the data, I'm going to analyze the result. Whatever results I've got, I'm going to analyze the result. Right? I may use statistical technique. I may describe them. I may plot them into graph, etc. Right? And finally, I have summarized. When you saw the results and discussion, we will discuss about it later. I'm going to summarize the experiment and communicate the results. So this is how any hypothesis makes the research focused, and it gives me a systematic way of conducting the research. Any doubts so far?
All good, ma'am.
Do you want to share something pertaining to the subject? Anything that you would like to share so that we can have a discussion on that? This is a, yes, please. Yes, Deepak.
Right now, nothing is coming in mind. We are contemplating how hypothesis will be. So right now, there is no topic in my mind.
Not just hypothesis, anything on research, like you want to make it a focus research, you want to identify a problem, say maybe a topic you can suggest and we can think of how we can convert it into a research problem. Any other, I mean, anything that we have seen so far. अभी तक हमने कुछ देखा है ना, जो भी देखा है उसके, if you have anything, please feel free, and let's try and make it interactive instead of me just speaking. You all can also participate. That is the idea basically. Now, what are the steps in testing a hypothesis? So, we have a process, it's a process. We state a hypothesis. First, we start with null hypothesis. When I state a hypothesis, I say that uh, there is no significant association. That's what we said, right? There is no association between gender and uh, age or demographic factors, we call them. Demographic factors in influencing the demand for Pantene shampoo. Okay? I've stated the null hypothesis. And then, समझ में आ रहा है? I will state the null hypothesis. Alternate hypothesis is there is an association between demographic factors and demand for Pantene shampoos. Then I will select the probability of error level, which means देखो, I will be collecting data from this uh, from this colony, and say there are about 400 households. I'm going to collect data from them. Each and every member of the house, I will be collecting data, and say 400 into, assuming there are 5 people in each household. So there are 2000 people. So I'm going to collect from all the 2000 people the data, and I'm going to test it statistically, and I'm going to understand कि how is it working, kind of. तो मैं क्या करूंगी, जब मैं 2000 लोगों से करती हूँ, and I'm going to consolidate, I'm going to analyze the results, I'm going to say 100 के 100% मेरे नहीं आ सकते हैं in the required threshold. So I'm going to keep us the same. Like 95% के लोगों को भी ये सूट होता है, I will accept my findings. 5% इधर उधर हो सकता है. Yeah, I will say it has to hold good for 93%. And then कि gender has an association. 60% इधर उधर हो सकता है. समझ में आ रहा है क्लास? Class, are you able to understand?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
So I will fix a threshold where it has to hold good. So, which means I say this is the probability of error level. 5% either other. Yeah, I fix it earlier itself for 7%, sometimes 1%, right? And I start computing the statistical significance. And I interpret. We just go back to this tab to show you the statistical significance, right? This was the one I shared, correct? Give me a minute. Here I've taken 5%, 95% it can be, and it is C. Class, do you see this tab here? Probability error, right? P value. I fix that to be 5%. So anything less than 5%, मतलब 95% से कम ही है, बराबर? It is 100% holding good. Therefore, I will accept, right? Class, are you following? Class?
Yes, ma'am.
So, I mean, it is too early to understand this, but just to show you what is this probability level, right? So, so I selected a probability level, and then I said probability of error matlab 5%. Significance level is 95%. If probability of error level is 3%, significance will be 97%. समझ में आ रहा है?
Yes, ma'am.
If probability of error is 1%, what is the significance?
99%.
Correct. तो 99% वो होना ही चाहिए मेरे सैंपल्स के साथ. 1% इधर उधर हुआ तो आई एम फाइन. दैट इज व्हाट वी से. आई विल स्टिल एक्सेप्ट माय फाइंडिंग्स. समझ में आ रहा है? दैट इज व्हाट वी मीन बाय दैट. Basically, we have two errors generally committed. we also make mistakes when we say test the hypothesis and interpret the result. So, what are those two types of errors? Which shall we see this tomorrow? We'll have a discussion again on hypothesis in brief, whatever we saw, and we will see this part tomorrow.
Sure, ma'am. Sure.
So
We
we
can.
say yes. What all did we see since morning? We saw what is a hypothesis, right? We started it yesterday. We saw what is a hypothesis, and then we gave some examples of hypothesis. We said why is it important, or what is a function of hypothesis, and then we spoke about what are the characteristics of hypothesis. Then we spoke about what are the types of hypothesis, where we discussed a few types. What were the few types? We said uh, directional hypothesis, simple hypothesis, complex hypothesis, null hypothesis, causal or associative hypothesis, mainly, right? These were the ones we discussed, and we saw a few examples of hypothesis. Then we said, what are the steps in testing a hypothesis? We said we will state a hypothesis. First of all, we start with null hypothesis. Exactly opposite of that will be alternate hypothesis. Null hypothesis is basically a negative statement. Then we selected a probability of error level. कहाँ तक ठीक रहना चाहिए? It may not hold good for the entire population. It can also hold good, like I showed in the example for you. But then, most of the time, it may not hold good. Therefore, we said 95% लोगों के लिए ये सूट होना चाहिए. 5% लोगों को इधर उधर होता है तो ठीक है. I will still accept the conclusion. And then we will select a computing, we will select any kind of test, statistical test is applied, and then you get the results out. तो वो रिजल्ट जो आता है ना आपको, से आपने 95% लगाया और 96% आया तो और भी अच्छा है. 95% लगाया, 93% आया, you will reject the hypothesis, right, and conclude otherwise. समझ में आ रहा है क्लास?
Yes, ma'am.
And you will interpret the results. While interpreting the results, or while accepting and rejecting the hypothesis, you may make these two errors, which we will see tomorrow. Class, I request you to join on time, so that we are able to cover a significant chunk. And when we meet up, we can practically discuss all these things with a background knowledge of all these things. Any doubts so far?
No, ma'am. We are good today.
Sure. Shall we stop now?
Yes, ma'am. Also, ma'am, when we will be having offline lecture for this?
I will inform you. Okay, I will inform you about that. Maybe I mean I can make it during weekends.
Okay, okay, ma'am.
Okay. I'm ending the meeting here.
Thank you, ma'am.